All right, first slide, introductions, okay? I am Sandy Lane of the Sandy and Cindy combo. Professional, that's the easier description I can give you first. I'm a CPA in Omaha, Nebraska. I've been working with my firm for about 23 years. Although I primarily work in healthcare, I've always worked with personal service organizations, service industries. Work a ton, husband, wife, because we do a lot of tax planning, we do a lot of estate planning, all those things that get tied into the business plan. So that's a bit about my background on the business side. On a personal side, I am not a spouse, but I'm a significant other of an HTG member, Garrett Brucker, okay? If you want to hear that whole story, it's actually very good, but that's not worth our 60 minutes here. So a lot of these things that we talk about, from my perspective, I do have a lot of background and I enjoy coming to these meetings and hearing both sides of it. So that's my background.
I'm Cindy Snide and my husband is Rick Snide. He's an HTG G15 with Garrett. I am from Westerville, Ohio. My husband has Revolution Group with a partner, an IT consulting firm there, and I actually work in the business as well. I serve as the marketing manager for them. We have a combined family with 7 children. Only 5 are still home, but they're calling me. So, and I'm very pleased to be here.
All right, I think we need to be a little bit louder too. Can everybody hear us? Is that a little better? Okay. We have 60 minutes to go through this, okay? First question that I have for everyone is, has anybody been to any of Arlen's training sessions on legacy, seen the documents, know anything about, looked at any of this? It's a lot of documents, isn't it? A little bit overwhelming. It's a lot of good stuff, great things to think about, but a lot of documents, okay? What we're talking about here could really be a whole day session of showing how to go through the documents, how's a business valued, things that you've talked about all morning, financial statements, things you need to look at, estate planning. We have 60 minutes. So what we're going to do, our takeaways, here are the 4 things that we're going to focus on. And Cindy and I, our perspective is we're going to give you what we think are, from the view up top, the most important things to look at and why, and really our insight that we think is over and above is the insight as the women, as spouse or significant other, and how we can add value to this process and really hone in on those items that we think are most important. So the things that we're going to look at is, first of all, we're going to cover, and we'll get to this one next, is practically what does this mean? Okay, legacy planning, what are we talking about here? Okay. Second, we're going to talk about terminology, all the different terms that go into the circle and the web of information that you need to pull through. What does that really mean? And what we really need to come down to is when you have a legacy plan, the legacy is what's important to your spouse and to your family. What's going to come out of that in the end to hit those vision and the goals? How does this ultimately, all these forms, checklists, and all the time that's invested in this, how does it benefit my spouse and my family? Spousal involvement, what's the role of the spouse, and then how to best differentiate the fine lines in legacy planning. Those fine lines, you cross different things. Some are on business, what's your spouse's business life? What's your personal life? And then there's a very gray area in between. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the role of being an accountability partner. Insights and guidance on how to best execute a legacy plan. How can this be accomplished? And realistically, what does that look like when you're all done? When I talked about the forms a bit, who had said that they had looked at the forms? Had anybody looked at the forms before? Did you spend much time on those forms yet? Have you done anything?
We have.
You have?
Yeah, but it's a process.
You know, one thing, because I've done some of this and some of the estate planning, but one thing that I'd say is if anybody has college-age kids and have had to fill out the financial aid form information, okay? Does anybody know what that feels like? Okay, when you're done, even if you don't need the financial aid, but you need it for scholarships, there's great value that comes out of it, but you just have to open it up and do it. That's part of this. And the add-on to this is, there's a lot of great intangibles that are going to come from that over those conversations on business planning, vision, and legacy that will come out of it. And last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Cindy, because we want your input, a lot of the things that you talked about this morning, financials, valuation, we were having fun reading through these, the camels, the turtles, the lions, that's fun stuff. It's good stuff, but that's all gonna be intertwined as you pull this together. All very important, and I think Arlen was he was very strategic in how he lined these up, because those do come pulled together when you look at the legacy plan.
They really do. We wanted to get a feel for the audience, all of you, and what is important to you and who you are, so we can address you more specifically. So I'm just going to ask a few questions, and also I want to make sure that everyone knows please feel free to ask questions, chime in. This is really just an open forum, and we want everybody to participate, not just us talk. So how many of you are first time here at HTG or at any HTG meeting? So, good,
Wow.
a lot. So did you come because of the spousal track, or, yeah? Oh, that's great. Are all of you, do you work outside, how many work outside the home? And how many work in the business that your spouse is in?
Oh, there's
Quite
a good
few,
representation
quite a few, yeah.
of different
Good.
things.
And how many have children at home? Lots. And how many have like elementary school and younger? Lots. So they're not calling you? That's good. That's good.
No, one reason why you come here is you say, kids, who has kids? You know, it's all about all the other stuff. They're taken care of.
Right. Well, when they're older, they have phones with them, and they are texting you during school. So, so that's a good representation. And so, how many of you, she kind of touched on this already, have actually done the legacy plan, have walked through the whole thing with your spouse? Okay, so I assume then you also haven't walked through the legacy plan for yourself at the same time. Okay. So, Sandy, let's hear about it.
The big question. I just threw in uncensored and unabridged. Okay, what is legacy planning? Do most of you think of we're really planning for death? Is that when you think of legacy planning, do most people think of what we're really focusing on, that fun thing to talk about, which isn't fun at all, and that's death? Okay, is that fair? I work a lot with people anybody comes in, and I'm working with them on their business plan. I'm working with them on their personal taxes. Okay, I always ask them the question, what have you done as far as an estate plan? And most of the time, it's the last thing they want to talk about. Okay, I don't like to talk about death. I'm a cup is half full girl. I like to talk about the good stuff. There's nothing fun to talk about with death. One thing I would tell you is this isn't just about death. You know, this is about planning for changes in your life, planning for things that are going to happen that take you against your normal day-to-day. Business as usual can quickly turn into not business as usual. And Cindy and I were talking about too just today, you know, things that I pick up between devotionals, going to different sessions. This morning, something we can all totally connect with. There was an HTG member, young guy, baby, wife. He's working at growing his business. So if you were to ask him what his business plan was, he's working to grow his business. They're acquiring businesses. They're adding partners. It's that time in your life when you're, late 30s that you're thinking about, hitting it big, really growing it. She had a parent that suddenly died, lived in another state. They need to care for the father. They're trying to figure out, can they bring the father? I mean, their whole life is upside down. Aging parents are a big deal. I mean, that is probably the number one thing I hear about with people of my age is it's not only the kids, we've gotten our kids. And I should have told you, I have 3 kids. I have 3 boys, and I have lots of stories I like to tell about them. My oldest is an accounting major too, but he is in college. Then I've got one in high school, and I've got a 12-year-old. So different dynamics there as well. But now, as my kids are getting a bit older and I'm getting older, rather than worrying about my kids, we have to think through within my plan, who's going to care for my parents? And that takes time. Part of that whole 168 hours in a week. So a couple stories I'm going to tell you. Cindy and I both, the way we best can tell a lot of this is through stories and things that you can really relate to on a day-to-day basis. I'll tell you a story of somebody who didn't have a legacy plan. I had a physician client that actually it was a Saturday morning. He was a specialist, and he actually was messing around driving. One of his partners was in a car next to him. I'm not going to say they were drag racing, but they were messing around a bit. He ended up in a car accident. He died. This is a physician. He had 4 kids. He didn't have adequate life insurance. He didn't have anything. His wife, and they were foreign too, okay? Just add that to it. Even though he had lived in America for a long time, his wife, this was all new to her. But that was, whoever would have thought that somebody who has all these advisors, because he had a financial advisor, he had an accountant, you know, he had employment agreements, but nobody forces you to take that next step and have everything in touch with a plan. This story isn't a good story, but it has a good outcome, okay? This story is a real story to me because my firm actually does work in the IT industry. We have an arm, it's an accounting firm, but we do what the HTG companies do, okay? We have a managed service arm, a help desk arm. We just bought another company and rolled them into us, okay? Why we bought that company is the owner was diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months ago. And he had a plan in place, okay? Even though that plan didn't follow, his spouse knew exactly, she was engaged, okay? She knew about the business, she knew what the plans were, she knew everything. So she went from the role of not only being the caretaker with him as he finished his life, but she was a pivotal role in making that sale happen when they took that fork in the road. How many people could do that if you didn't take all these steps that we're going to talk about first? So when the fork in the road happens, you can successfully come up with other alternatives, and you're the spouse who's engaged. You have to be an engaged spouse to help out and play that role in those next steps. And that's understanding the business, not just the funeral directives.
And on that, along that same
Yep.
line, you are also important to your spouse as well. So it's important for you as a spouse to also have a legacy plan. Does your spouse know where the kids are supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there? Does he know all the doctor's numbers and who to call for carpool? So it's not just about death either. It's
Right.
about what if you fall ill? I mean, it does happen, unfortunately. Do you have it in place where he would know where to go to pull that information that he would need to keep the family up and running? Because most of you have children at home, and some of you probably have very small children. So
There's one thing too, I'm going to show, the next thing I'm going to do, we're going to talk about the legacy plan terminology, but there's actually some forms that some of you said that you're familiar with them, others not. When this is all done, they'll put them in the portal so you can access these forms. There's actually an Excel document and 3 Word documents. Okay, let's look at the Excel document first. And Cindy has a great, I'm going to show you this, but no two, these are great templates, but there's, as we know in apps, Apple apps, what have you, you can get a lot of other good information. Sorry about that. So for this one, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but for every tab, it's a collection. This is a data collector. This is a good checklist data collector on who's, your personal information, your employer information, your personal advisors, your accounts. Let's see what else we have here. We're looking at, you've got real estate, you've got business. I mean, it's a lot of data. This is the one that reminds me of the student aid forms. Okay, it's just a lot of data. But Cindy has a great alternative to this too.
I do. My husband and I use Secret Server Online. Does anyone else use that? You can have one license for free, and it's basically where we keep everything, all of our very important information, all of our passwords, all of our account numbers, the Power School, where my kids' grades are stored, the passwords are stored there for them. My kids' Facebook passwords are stored there in case I need to creep or
Twitter
end
accounts.
them. Yes, all of that information, and of course all the business information too. So if something were to happen to either Rick or myself, we would be able to go in and get the passwords that we need, because how devastating if you couldn't access your bank account because you didn't have the account information. And so this way, all you need to know is the password to get into secret servers. So,
Right.
which sometimes I forget, but
And that part, that data collection part is huge. And that's even in maintaining regular life. And that's even when the small instances happen that, every day I just hear of something new. Today they were talking about, I was in a session, they talked about that the husband actually had a heart attack, and this was in November, heart attack or something happened, he didn't wake up until December. Things that happen, I think I had read it was in Arlen's email that he had sent out of a spouse that did she have a root canal, and she ends up, she can't go out of a room, she's very, very ill. Well, do you really want to be asking for every one of these passwords and figuring out where the forms are, have one centralized place for that? And it also comes in handy for a lot of other practical things when you do travel with your spouses where people can access that information. There is a great tool that HTG put together. This template, again, will be put on the portal that you'll have access to, or you can have after the meeting. I think they'll send out an email or give you the links. This one really talks about the 4 main plans, okay? And it's a Word file that can be filled in, okay? And what you'll find, and you'll see when we flip on here on the screen, there's a lot of different ways to look at a business plan. So the first form that is emphasized in here is a business plan. And that's really your spouse and their company, what their business plan is, what their core vision is, what's their mission. They probably have this, maybe not in this form, but in another form. But that's a great document to go through and hear about if you're not actively engaged in the business, just to hear, using this as a checklist for main things, main points of conversation. Why does the business exist? And they might feel or sound a little bit silly, but they're great. They're things we all get so caught up in the daily life. It's amazing on how many of these things you don't talk about, because you know what? What I find is we have roles in life, and what we do is we assume those 2 roles. He does, I'll just use as an example. He's running the business, I'm running the home. The last thing we want to do is talk about work. But it's so important, at least to go through the core, and that's the way to get engaged. You can help out with some of these other things. The other part of this template that I'm going to go through, we've got the business plan. The next section is their leadership plan. Again, it's not like you're going to hand it to your spouse and say, please fill this out and we're going to go through it later. To me, they're more, I would start out as talking points as it relates to the business. That would be the strategy I would employ, is just to start out as talking points, and you'll probably find that there is something in writing somewhere, or it's up here. And then to memorialize some of those things on these forms will just help, because then it's a starting point too. Because the other good part of when I say a good estate plan or a good plan, is you want to review it every year, because things change. You can't say, oh, I'm done with it. Now we're done. We're going to go put it away. Life changes. Your kids get older. Your parents get older. Your goals change. How about another one? I want to go out, I want to conquer the world. I'm going to work 55 hours and I'm going to have the biggest IT business in the Midwest. Well, it's funny how things change, and 5 years later you think, you know what, I want to work 30 hours a week. I want to stay in the company, but things change. And that changes all of this considerably, and how you look at that. The next part of this document, they talk about the life plan. And then also the last part talks about the legacy plan. And we're not gonna go through these every step of the way. There's some other forms on here that we will look at, but that template will be out there, and that will be good. And there'll be 2 more, and I'm not gonna pull these up. The other 2 that I referred to, one actually is a funeral guide, where you go through and you go through the steps of actually putting on your funeral and what you want, where you want to be buried. Again, not a fun conversation to have, but you need to have it. And then the last one is there's actually, hold please, that's the funeral planning guide. Oh, the will. Getting back to other templates, a suggestion I would have that I think is a good place to start, has anyone worked with an attorney to set up an estate plan? Very good. I mean, that's a great starting point. To start with that, with all these other things, that's a great starting point, because those are the icky questions. Those are the hard questions. And when an attorney looks at you and says, to both of you, here's your homework. I can't do anything until you tell me if you want to be resuscitated. If you want, that's coming from an attorney, that's the best starting point. If you haven't seen an estate attorney, I would suggest to do that, because he'll have some of these templates as well. If you have, pull out those documents, okay? Even another little takeaway I'd say is to remind everyone of is check your beneficiaries. It's amazing how You might ask to have beneficiaries changed, and they didn't get changed. Make sure everything stands the way you want it. I've had that happen in organizations that we changed HR, we changed a 401k, and something, the T's were not crossed or the I's dotted the way we wanted them to be. One more point I want to have on that is, now I'm a little biased when I ask this, but personal taxes. I know you all file them, and I know at a minimum you sign your name on the line that says you can e-file your return or sign your return. How many of you have a relationship with either your personal financial planner, your accountant, or engaged in actually doing your taxes? Well, that's a great number. That is a great number. I have it happen. I tell you that of the clients I have, I'd say probably 80% of the time, the male is the one that does a majority of it. I might have a relationship with the female, see her at charity functions, she's my Facebook friend, whatever, but she's not actively engaged in some of the things that fit into that whole program. I'd say 20% participate, come to all those meetings, know exactly what's going on. I would just encourage all of you not only to sign the return and know here's how our taxes ended up for this year, really know how that ties into everything else, know your professionals, know them on a level high enough that if something were to happen, you're not going to miss a beat. You know you're going to call that person and say, I need you now. I need your help. The other thing, and this is a takeaway as far as gathering this information, your accountant, anymore, like for us, we have portals available. Our clients sign up for that portal. I would tell you that with these documents, that we keep work papers. You as my client or anyone else's client can have access to those portals. And even the corporate, whoever your spouse's corporate accountant is, will have things like that. Put some of these baseline documents in there. Put your estate, kind of use that as they already have all your other documents. I would ask, hey, add this to your work papers so we have at least one more spot to have a lot of the major documents. Cindy, I know that you have a great example you wanted to give. In terms of the role of the working spouse in the business?
I work in the business, and I'm sorry, let me see a show of hands again of everybody that works in the business. And what do all of you do? I mean,
well, I used to be technical.
Okay.
My husband and I were both consultants, and then I pulled back, and now I do internal finance, HR, marketing, just
Right.
internal operations.
and so you're
I'm
finance,
marketing, HR, finance manager, and
right? I think that's what a lot of us end up in. Is anybody any different? Is anybody more technical? Database development.
Wow.
Okay. So I work in the business too. So what I have to share probably is no different than you. But I started there just kind of as an event planner, supposedly. But of course, I've done many things since then. Fortunately, I've broken out of the quoting and ordering, which was about to kill me. But as a spouse working in the business, it's a fine line sometimes. I'm not considered a partner, even though I'm an owner, kind of. And so I walk a very fine line, and I think probably a lot of you find the same things. Our company has grown rapidly. We're now at 26 people, up from just 15 a year ago, and so I'm not just Rick's wife all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to play a role, and I think that the role that we play is important to our spouse, and it's important to the company that we're in. I have some suggestions. How many of you have your spouses have a partner, and you're not just a sole? So just one. Okay. Well, for anyone my husband has a partner in his business, and they do cross insurance, so that if something would happen to his partner or to him, they are insured. They have life insurance on one another, so that they can buy out the spouse.
Is that Key-Man insurance that you have?
Yes.
That is what it's
So they do that, and it's a buyout. So automatically,
a buy-sell
she-
agreement.
yes, and it's a buy-sell agreement.
I have a question. Is it only life insurance, or is it disability as well? Because one of those partners will be disabled.
Right. The question was, is it only life insurance or is it disability as well? And yes, it is disability as well, right? So that's very important. So if you have a partner, and maybe there's just one, but if it's possible that your husband will get a partner at some point, and it's important to have that.
And that's a good point too, because that's one thing I keep hearing over and over again is acquiring different companies. There's a lot of mergers going on out there, and that's a huge takeaway, what Cindy's talking about. You know, the last thing I talk to, within my firm, we do this, just like they do that within their company, and it's what I 99% of the time advise to my clients. The last thing, you went through the valuation. I would have loved to have heard that presentation, but it's complicated. Valuations are very complicated. And things like death changes the valuation of a practice too, because that's an event, okay? That could change what the value is. The last thing you want as a surviving spouse is to try to figure out what you need to get paid for that company. And the other interesting note I'll always hear, you look at insurance. I mean, talk about something that's not fun to do. The whole life insurance process or disability, it's not fun. That one's just, get it over with. But when you look at that, go a little bit higher for the value. It's very hard to go back and get more, okay? So one big conversation I have quite a bit is, we looked at this and why don't we just get the $1 million policy? Well, maybe we really only need, if we really look at the value today, the value is only $750,000. Okay, two things. If somebody dies and they get a windfall of $250,000, I think we're okay, if that's the reason, okay? So if somebody ends up with more than the value, we would rather have it that way.
It's tax-free.
Yes, and it's tax-free. It's tax-free. And the other side is, at some point, you're probably going to want to increase it. You don't want to go back and ask for more coverage. And disability insurance, the same too. You want to be sure, a takeaway I'd give you on disability insurance is make sure you know with that disability coverage if it's pre-tax or post-tax when you get the benefit, okay? That makes a big difference. Usually they'll pay, let's say 75% of what your comp is. Well, if they're going to pay that to you pre-tax, after they take all the taxes out, compare that to your take home right now. Make sure you understand what that equation is and ask the question if it will be taxable when the benefit comes, because that will impact for you how much coverage you want, and it also impacts their premium too, because they want to know the reason they don't give you 100% is they want to make sure people are incentivized to go back to work and that it's not too easy not to. So.
And while we're on the insurance topic, it's important that your spouse also has insurance on you, because you're important as well. Rick makes jokes about what he would do with that kind of money, but whiskey and women, he says, and then the rest he'd waste. But it is important that because there are lots of things that you do, even if you don't work in the business, it's important that you're also insured as well, and we are in our company too. So.
And the one thing, just to reiterate again, with the legacy planning, a lot of this seems to focus on the spouse that has the business, but integral to this whole process is if something were to happen to any of you. Because think about how that, we'll look at, as we go and look at some of these forms, some of these things that we need to look at for the whole plan, we all know it. Your spouse's life would be upside down without you there. I mean, let's be real. We know things would be completely different. And that's going to change their plan, and they need to have coverage or ideas, and they need your input. Because can you imagine? I mean, Cindy and I were talking about this on a run this morning. You talk about so many things that I think are more tactical in nature as it relates to your kids, your family, or what you want done. If you ask yourself the question, if something were to happen to you, would your spouse know what your intentions are, what that big picture, what the goals are, how to handle daily life with the things that you handle? Would they know how to do this? And make sure that you've got that in the plan.
Would he know that I wanted Staying Alive playing at my funeral?
Right.
One of my favorite movies, my favorite movie is Love Actually. And if you've seen it, Liam Neeson's wife passes away, and it's part of the love story. In the very beginning, you never meet her, but she plays her eulogy. He gives her eulogy, and she wanted "Bye Bye Baby" played, and so that was part of his eulogy to her. It was also part of his eulogy that he was supposed to bring, who did I say?
Claudette.
Claudia Schiffer
Claudia
to the
Schiffer.
funeral. And for me, it's George Clooney. I get to bring George Clooney to Rick's funeral.
I'll bring him for you.
Oh,
How about
okay.
that? Add that to the list. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this. I mean, business plan is critical. I think the biggest takeaway for this is make sure whatever form it's in, make sure you have the conversation, you sit down with your spouse, and you understand what their business plan is. I would tell you that from my experience, sometimes they go through this so many times during the day, they get home and they'll say, you know, I don't really feel like talking about work. Isn't something you have to talk about every night? But it's almost like it needs to be on the list that you really need to know whether during those key times in the cycle of your spouse's business, where are they at on their business plan? And make sure you understand what that is and ask those hard questions as what I'd call the engaged spouse. The next one, so we're gonna go to the next one. And remember too with these, that worksheet, that Word file has a copy or a sample of each one of these types of plans in them. And this is similar, and actually Arlen had used his, so I mean you can certainly go through and read all this detail. One thing, and this kind of gets back to, remember I said it's all integrated in, the camels and the turtles and the lions. At the end of the day, you really do want everything documented, okay? Just so you have, it clears the vision to get everything on paper. And most of these things, especially when you work your way back on the funeral type things and arrangements and the data files where everything's collected, the passwords, that all needs to be written down. It's easy to skip these parts and say, okay, we kind of talked about these, we don't need to write these down, write them down, okay? It clears the mind, and it documents things that a year from now when either A, things don't happen, that you know your spouse wanted to get done and they didn't, you talked about this. Whether it was over a glass of wine and dinner, you talked about it, you know you're there to encourage them, you're there to say, well, wait a second, you know, one thing Cindy and I talked about, it gets back to that 168 hours in the week. People can put this life plan together, okay, and then you as the spouse look at it and say, those are awesome things, but you forgot about how you tell me at least once a week how you'd love it if you actually had time to sit down at dinner with a family. Where does that fit in here? You know, we can be overachievers on this list, but the practical things that we live every day, how many times have I heard, I'm talking to my spouse, you say, gosh, I'd love to take a 1-week vacation with no interruptions. Does that need to be on this list? Okay, but then we've got, I like to call it the squeeze play. We all have the squeeze play. You have 168 hours, some of us have job responsibilities, kid responsibilities. We got all these balls that we are trying to juggle. How does that fit on here? And a big part of this life plan is the family. How does that all come together? But you got to understand the business side and know that business plan to actively and in an engaged way help on the life commitments.
And I think we as women, maybe I'm being prejudiced, but we as women are better in looking at the whole picture, at the life plan and the business plan, putting it together. I think that Rick will forget, oh yeah, we're eating dinner, everybody's eating dinner tonight, and that is something that we do every single night, and we eat about 9 o'clock every night too, because everybody is going here and there and here and there. But the only way to work it in is to eat at 9. And he sometimes says, why don't we eat earlier? And I hand him the schedule. This is why we don't eat earlier. And I think we as women have to help our spouses, and not always, but help our spouses be realistic in what their expectations are in the life plan and in the business plan.
And I think the other thing too, working right with that, any business owner, they're told, all of us, anybody who has done anything as far as managing people, you can't manage what you can't measure, okay? You can't talk about a year from now on if they're hitting their head against the wall, if we haven't done, it's a year from now, we still haven't written down our plan, we haven't, putting all this down on the sheet of paper, even for the simplistic things like, you know, we really want to have dinner together at least 2 nights a week. If you have it written down, you talked about it, you've got something you can go back to again. So that's the critical piece there. Even though it sometimes it almost seems silly, but the one thing I'd say too, okay, how many people said who has children, teenage children? Okay, teenage children. Okay, who spends time talking with their spouse about their children's lives? A lot of times you might be telling him what's going on. Do we spend a lot of time planning our kids' lives? No? all the emails from the teachers, checking their grades, getting them to soccer practice. I'm calling it orchestrating. I mean, I don't micromanage my kids, but they suck up a lot of my time for all the things that we have going on, okay? My point in all this is the same amount of time to look at this type of information, these types of things that really impact you and your spouse. You need to put as much time into that. You know, it's interesting too, I've been reading, there's a bunch of articles. I think a lot about how I was raised versus how I raised my kids, and how society has changed, and somehow our kids have become the focal point. You know, my parents, I always laugh. I mean, it was very apparent to me. My parents loved each other, and it was about them, and I was second. And I was okay with it. And somehow that's changed in our society, and that's why we don't have time to even think about these kinds of things. My dad was the finance person, but my mom went with him, and she knew everything that was going on. And they talked about things like this because they had more time to talk. Because they told us, you go do your thing. We're busy, you know? So I always think that's a bit interesting too, if we kind of look at how things have changed and roles have changed.
And my parents were farmers, so they worked together all the time and had time to talk about this kind of thing. But in our busy lives, where we're running our kids everywhere, it seems like people don't have time to talk. Rick and I run together, so we have a designated 1 to 2 hours, 4 days a week, that we can actually talk about these things and have written them down too.
Here's at the end of the whole exercise that you go through, when you go, the end of all the planning, this is a sample of a final legacy plan that really talks about, you know, and again, Arlen used his as an example for him. What's his personal mission statement? I'm not going to read it out loud, but it's a great exercise. What I'd suggest doing too is for both you and your spouse, once you've kind of gone through all these things, that you each write your own out. Talk about them and see how they link together, because sometimes you find out some interesting things once you take some time and write it on paper too. But here he talked about, you know, making a difference, how that was meaningful to him, you know, what brings purpose to your life. Great talking points. He's talking about at the end, you know, again, how is he going to use his 168 hours? Legacy statement. What do you want for your life? What do you want your life to mean after you're gone? I mean, that's a great question to ask. All these things that we do, all these people that we touch, you know, relationships. I'm a huge believer in the most important thing in life are the relationships you have. It's the best asset I have. It's my most favored asset are my relationships. My kids, my friends, my family. There's nothing, no bonus, no buyout that can replace that. How am I going to work that into here? Gets back to the 168 hours. But on the other hand, you know, my family can't live in a hut. I need to support them. You know, how do these things all work together? And it really brings out, it's a great conversation with the spouse, and that's part of the business. Ask the hard questions. What's one of my goals? I'll use as an example. Let's say a spouse says, my goal is I want to grow this business and I want to be the largest technology company, you know, in the area. Ask the question, why? What are we going to do with that? Even if, okay, we're going to do that because we want to grow, we want to have value. What are you going to do with the money in retirement? What are the plans and how is it going to get there? And is it worth the work to get there? And it probably is, but it gives that engaged conversation of having the mutual goals and knowing what you want. Things to assess, they talk about a business disaster. We're not going to get into the business disaster recovery plan. I know there are a lot of great tools. The great thing about HTG is a lot of these things, they've got a lot of good tools for this. I mean, the things I'm putting on, there's a few of them. As you dig a bit, I know that the spouses that are in HTG, not only do they have the resource of the documents, people here love to help each other out and bounce questions, and they do challenge each other on work-life balance and why they want to do things. I love to sit in some of these meetings and hear them call each other out and say, tell me what's your motive in doing that? Why do you want to do that? And they're pushing them just as hard on the other side to get this stuff done. And I will guarantee you, I think they put it actually in the goals that everybody needs to come to their quarterly meetings with these plans. So they're looking at this and thinking about this, and this is very important for you to get involved in as well. Imperative for you to get involved in. And then here's the action plan. It all looks good on paper, but how are we going to do it? Sometimes it's simple steps. Talk to the attorney. Let's start there. Let's document. I mean, it can be simple. Let's talk to the attorney. Let's get our estate planning going. Let's get everything in our security. Let's get in the software that is called Secret Server.
Online.
Yep,
Yeah,
get that done.
And just when you do it, just when you set up a bank account, go put it in secret server. It doesn't have to, you don't have to sit there for hours and hours and hours and put everything in. Just as you think about it, oh yeah, I better go put this in secret server. Oh yeah, I'm going to put this in secret server. But little things like this will make a difference in the end or in the long run.
Any questions so far? Any questions about the legacy plan? Questions, comments? As we go, anybody?
I have a question to everyone else, though. Because my husband works with a partner, and it is written that his partner will buy me out if something would happen to him. How about all of you who are sole proprietors? What's in the cards for you? What will you do? Because I'm interested, because I think that's interesting.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that's where my husband and I struggle the most. If something happens to one of us, then the other one will continue to run the business. But if something happens to both of us, we don't have any children.
Okay.
And then so we're always talking, do we do some kind of key man insurance that would pay me out and then have, they're so complicated. Like, do you have your employees, do you have key employees that would run the business? Like in our case, we have 3 guys that are kind of the main guys that run the business while we're away. But how do you set that up? I know some people have set up like key man life insurance so that those employees have insurance on them, but do you really want to do that? So it's really complicated, and that's where we're struggling. We have our estate planning, our financial planning, all that part is taken care of. It's the business side if something happens to both of us, and we're both pilots, so we fly, we do a lot of crazy stuff, and
So
you know,
this isn't like, hey, this.
But then part of me is like, do we really care if we're gone since we don't have kids? But I mean, but I have animals, and in my will, they're going to be taken care of.
Okay.
So that part is taken care of. But it's really critical because we don't want our business to cease. We have 17 employees. We want them to continue on because to us, they're family since we don't have kids.
So what's important to you and your spouse is the legacy of your business too.
It is,
You'd
and
like
that's
it to continue.
That's why I'm here. But I mean,
Yep.
we talk about it in HTG, and then we put it off. I mean, we're supposed to be working with another HTG member in our group that is kind of in a similar thing. Their kids are grown. Well, they had separate, or one of them had separate kids from another marriage.
Right.
So they're kind of similar to us. So we were like, oh, great, we could get great insight. Or, do we buy out their company or vice versa? But it's like, it's so hard to go down that road.
Right.
And it's like, you don't want to talk about it.
You almost have to, and this is my advice, is just really almost play it out in your minds. How would you, as far as who would take over tactically, would you want one employee to have it? What would you want that to look like? Let's just say something did happen to
And then
both
how
of
do you do that, though? Do you just give them the business that you work so hard for? Don't you want them to buy into it somehow?
Have them buy into it, and you can talk that through, but you can put that in their employment agreements, okay? You can put that into your business plan. What I would suggest is employing a business attorney. It's really succession planning is what you're talking about, okay?
And we have a good attorney, and he's
Okay.
just waiting on us to give him deliverables.
Okay, so is he giving you some advice on how to do this, or have you verbalized to him some of these things?
We have, and we know what we need to do. We just, I mean, it's just like nailing it down and doing it. And
And
my
they
husband
should
and I
pay
are both
for it.
lions, and we are just avoiding this one thing.
Right. You know what? I would say you're both lions. You need to take the next step. Visualize how you want it to be. Should they, make those decisions? You're asking all the right questions. Should they pay? They probably should. They're
But
not.
where are they going to get the money?
Yeah. The other thing is
That's my big thing. It's like, you want them to actually want to earn it, not to just be given the company, because we work so hard to build the company to what it is. So how do you go about, do you do some kind of a life insurance plan? And I have my life insurance or my insurance agent kind of giving me some ideas too, but she's waiting on me, and I don't know.
Who's the executor of your estate when that happens? Who's going to rule everything out?
Our
Have you
attorney
made
in
it?
Wells Fargo.
Okay. You might want to think about a personal executor to be involved too.
Okay.
Some close family member that's going to be
We
looking
don't,
over.
that's a whole other ball of wax.
Okay.
We-
Okay. How about somebody in business, or do you feel comfortable?
Well, it could be an HTG member. That's what we're thinking, that maybe
just
Robin
to
and
look
Ken.
over. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to bring in that personal flavor to know that's one more step on this legacy plan. Okay. So then who your personal executor is needs to know what you want
That's
that
a big
legacy to
job
look
too,
like.
though, to turn over to somebody.
It's a big job for
Okay.
anyone. Okay. But if it's less of a big job when all you have your ducks in a row.
That's
Okay?
true.
You have financial professionals. You have those are the differences, because I've had situations where people have passed away that are single, okay, and they're like or divorced or what have you. Their kids are older, and if everything has been planned out and you've got the professionals in place and a plan, they're doing that as let's get back to the relationship thing. What better gift could they give back to you than to take care of it? But you don't want to give them with a pile of, they don't want to make those decisions for you.
Right.
Okay? So if you make the decisions and say they're going to have to make some, but all they're doing is they, with their heart, are making sure that those things are happening for you. I think that's a great plan. Again, everybody has different scenarios. For me, my executor is my dad. He's a great, he is absolutely the one that I go to. But can I tell you that he said to me, I'm getting old. Your kids are getting older. I don't really ask. That's the other thing. Who you have down to have your kids or be the executor of your estate, make sure they still want to do it. People get older and they get scared. And I'm looking at my dad saying, how could you not want to handle everything? And so what we did, and this is an example of how asking people, looking at your plan, as I talked to him, my secondary is one of my partners in the office, okay? And so what my dad knows is if he doesn't want to do it, he can even interview my partner. You can have two in line too, okay? And if one person, you can do it so if something happens to one, it's the next one, or that first person can say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable doing this. I'm going to pass the torch to number 2, and I know it was your intent that if I didn't want to, I could go to number 2. But great point to bring up too about the executor of the estate, because how often you're doing awesome things that are a bit more dangerous, but how often do we all travel together? In a car?
That's probably more dangerous than flying.
Right. True. So executor is that's a great point to bring up.
So does
Great
anyone
point.
else have somebody else that has other plans set up? What happens if your husband passes
Can I
away?
just comment? She said that she's having a hard time getting it done. Can't you just put it in your quarterly board goal?
Well, we were supposed to, after we met last meeting, and I think Mike, my husband, did have a conversation with Ken, the other HTG member, but I wasn't involved in that, and I don't think much got done. And I think he was like, we're gonna revisit it tomorrow and the next couple days. So it's something I really wanna get done, and my insurance agent is waiting to see if she can get some key man insurance or something to that effect, but.
I just know that the one thing that tends to frequently motivate my husband is that when he has to stand up in front of
And
every-
answer.
every quarter in answer to the goals that he has set for himself, that they all agreed he would
It's a
set for
great
himself.
point.
And when he does or doesn't get them done, it usually has a pretty big motivational impact on him. So have them hold you accountable.
That's a great comment, I think we're getting a little, how are we doing on time? Getting close?
We're close.
Oh, we're close, so we're still good. Spousal involvement, we've talked about a lot of great things with spousal involvement. I'm going to briefly go through each one of these. Really, we've talked about this, documenting, okay? Having it documented and make sure, you might think you have an understanding. The other thing is, great point that you brought up, it might sound like, okay, I just need to do this. It gets more complicated as you think it through. It is. It's kind of like opening Pandora's box in a way, because you open it up and it's like, oh gosh, I never thought of that, and I've got to think through this. So documenting it, thinking through it, taking those first steps. And we talked about this with the key man insurance. The last thing you want to do if something happens, your spouse, anyone, we don't want to add more emotion to it and more. This is something you shouldn't have to deal with. Anybody should have to deal with when bad things happen, whether it's disability, sickness, death. Your life investment comes out to what you want in your legacy plan. Your spouse, you've invested a lifetime in wanting to have something at the end, whatever your goals are. You don't want that to slip away because you haven't taken the time to do all these things. The legacy that you leave through your business, through yourself, is way important to go through the steps and get it taken care of. And again, I talked about if you think about the amount of time, let's just say to run a household, the amount of time that we expend to run a household, to run our collectively crazy lives, it's worth taking some time out and doing these things. And number 5, I will just tell you, if I could put it on a resume, when people say add all the credentials after the name, when you do lit support work, they want to know everything you went to, and you have this really long CV that talks about all the classes, the presentations you've made, the things you've done. And I always want to say, if I could name the number one thing, is if I said my best trait, it'd be that I have wicked intuition. okay? As women, you call it perception, call it whatever you want, call it instinct. By knowing all these things and sitting back a bit, everybody needs that accountability partner. I hate to put it on the female, but I'm telling you, we have better perceptive. We're more perceptive, okay? We have just we got that instinct in us. And sometimes you look at all these things and just, even if it's the players that you're dealing with, having that intuition and having that, having a second set of eyes to see things and question, okay, why do you want to partner with this person, okay? You know, I've heard you talk about this client, you know, is that really how you want to move and progress in your business? Just looking at some of the things you see from the outside and adding that, they're not going to hear that within their business meetings at work. They're not. It's a whole different perspective that I think is so valuable, and they do value at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, as women, you know, that whole putting the heart and soul into it, knowing the legacy plan and the wants, has the biggest impact on pulling this all together. Anything you want to add to that? It'd be on her resume too, I just know it. Really, in summary, we've got the business plan. I think we talked about, you can get all different kinds of business plans out there. You picked up a lot of good things, I'm sure, this morning and from your backgrounds of what should be in those. Leadership plan. How's your spouse leading the company? What does that look like? Does he have a partner? Is he going to bring in more partners? What would happen if he left? How does that model look? Do you have 17 employees, 3 employees? Who are the key employees? If something happened to him, a great question would be, who could fill his role at work? You know, how do these things look? Know the answer to those questions. The life plan tells how life and work are balanced, that wonderful 168 hours, and how to achieve the things that mean the most to your family. That's really what it comes down to. For you as a family, as a couple, you know, what really means something, what means the most to you, and how do you want that to look? And then the legacy plan tells others and each other what to do in the event that something happens to the company, your spouse, and basically you can't keep your lives from day to day. Things are going to change. And there's a lot of things that can change our lives. I think we all know that.
It doesn't have to just be death. It could
No.
be some other catastrophic circumstance that changes your life that you need to have plans in place for everyone to move forward.
Is there anything else that anyone has questions about? Anything more you'd like to discuss? Comments, examples, anyone?
So a lot of you haven't been to HTG before. You have, but how many were first timers again to come to HTG? A lot. Did you just get here today or yesterday or yesterday?
Yesterday.
And so another question I have is, how does your husband feel about HTG, and how do you feel about the interaction? Does he come home excited? Because mine does. Frustrated sometimes. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone should know that Sandy blogs, so if you've enjoyed her, her writing is quite fun, so you should go and look for Sandy on her blog. I don't know.
Let me know, because one can never have too many friends. And talk about that intuition thing. Everybody, I bet, has an example of somebody they met along the way, the course of their life, that unexpectedly they helped you out in a way that you'd never. That's why this stuff is fun too. I mean, Cindy and I met completely through HTG. Of course, it's kind of an incentive to go back and forth, but as the spouses, it's great to be engaged with the other women.
Are spouses in the same HTG?
They are.
Yes. Okay.
So then we do the side ones at the same time too. So.
We've got about 35 viewers online, and a number of them have asked if you guys could say your names, because they really enjoyed your content.
Okay.
And if you could tell your blog address too, that'd be great.
Okay, well, let's see if I can remember my blog address. Okay.
I don't remember it.
Okay. I don't have internet access.
You can give it to me and I can post
Okay. Sandy Lane, that was the first question, right? I work for Lutz & Company in Omaha, Nebraska. My blog is, and the blog is fun, so it really has not a lot to do with legacy.
CPA stuff?
No, that's way
much
too
more fun than
boring.
that.
You know what? It's Sandy with a Y, Sandy A. Lane at blogspot.com. So if you go to blogspot.com, where the blogs are, it's Sandy A. Lane. Yes, I think that
She'll
is
enjoy
correct.
that.
And I will verify that.
And I'm Cindy Snide. I work with my husband at Revolution Group in Westerville, Ohio. And thanks very much for listening to us. We had fun.
And we love your cards too, because we're usually here.
Yes, we are usually here, almost always.
Brought to you by the fine folks at Varvid, video and digital media for business. Contact us at info@varvid.com or online at varvid.com.